Afternoon, everyone, and I am Danita Jones with Texas Resistance Rising. We are live with our Texas Grassroots Alliance live stream, and today I have with me Alexander Montalvo with Tearing for Change and Neil Aquino with Houston Democracy Project. You can follow me, Texas Resistance Rising, on my Substack, and also Houston Democracy Project at houstondemocracyproject.com. So today we're framing our conversation about the State of the Union and how elected officials communicate about issues, what gets said, what gets missed, and how local candidates in Texas communities navigate communication on issues. We will discuss how the autonomy of grassroots organizers is essential to the breakthrough, the political speech, and the importance of communicating the truth with communities. So I'm going to get us started with the State of the Union address. And I just wanted to say that it was very broad. It was a broad stroke with one pen, talking about certain issues that that the president was going to deal with, and how he was going to fight for democracy. And I just want to ask you all, you guys and you listeners, what does that look like for you when you don't even know what it is that they're talking about, or they can't even bring themselves to talk about the issues, or say the words abortion, or say the word voter suppressive? Like, what does that say to you about our current situation in federal government and local government?
You want to go first,
Well,
Neil?
well, okay. So it's always right. It was ignored, and the speech had strengths as well, but that ignored mention some of the most pressing issues. Sometimes I find myself wondering, why didn't you say that 2 years ago or 3 years ago? Are just being said now to win our votes, without the sincere intent to implement. And I think that I really like I think what you're saying really does have great connection to local officials. So often here at the local level in Texas, where you have elected officials who could speak. President Biden could also speak, but you have elected officials who have constituencies that would be open and receptive to hearing a greater truth spoken at local level either.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I also think that there's a fear there of being reelected when you talk about issues directly. Not so much when you paint them with a broad stroke, but when you just talk around those particular issues, because you never hear anyone directly go on with gun violence in the state or access to guns in our state, because it's such a triggering thing to talk about for elected officials. We see what happened with Beto when he talked about guns and how that, you know, turned his election. Um, how do you think, as as organizers, how do we believe in our candidates or elected officials when they're afraid to talk about the issues at hand and those issues that affect us directly? Like, Alex, you want to hop
Yeah.
into
So,
that?
so yeah, I think this is one of the big tensions that happen within grassroots organizing and election seasons, right? So, grassroots organizers are building relationships directly with communities and where they reside in the neighborhoods that they live, and the various community leaders and key community members that can help us, get in sync to try to fight for something, right? Whether it's advocating activism or electing someone. It becomes really difficult for grassroots organizers, though, to put their weight behind an elected official or a candidate who is unwilling to speak the truth about issues for political purposes, for political maneuvering, for what they think in terms of their calculus will help them be successful when whatever version of success that they're trying to pursue. And so those conversations become really, and this is what impacts enthusiasm when we're trying to organize within communities, because when a community organizer, when a grassroots organizer can speak the truth about what's happening and the candidate is aligned in speaking that truth, it becomes really easy to talk to communities about this and why there's an opportunity worth pursuing to elect someone, because this is what's directly being talked about. This is directly what's going to be pursued. But when the political speech overtakes, when the over calculated considerations of various pieces around other issues or things happen that start to, limit how we talk about the truth around a certain issue, then that's when communities start to reject a particular elected official, a particular candidate, and the grassroots organizers kind of put in the middle. And let's be honest, as grassroots organizers, we want autonomy so that we can continue to hold elected officials and candidates and people in power accountable. So we're always going to prioritize our relationship with community before we're going to prioritize a relationship with a candidate or elected official. And that frustrates them because they see us as a valuable asset in the community to get them their win. But our point is, look, if you're not going to speak truth about this, if you're not going to pursue solutions that are going to be that are going to adequately solve this, then we're not going to, go around and singing your praises because it's inadequate what you're doing.
Right. And they're afraid, if you bring up the issue, then you got to address it. So when are you going to bring up income inequality? When are you going to bring up the fact that flood last year was climate change aided? But then you've got to address the refinery that's in your district, or then you have to address the causes of income inequality. So that's your donor. And so they're inhibited by this stuff. The next question is, well, what are you going to do with it? They're not going to do anything.
Yeah, I understand and agree with you all wholeheartedly on that. One of the things that I did notice in the State of the Union address was the president kept insinuating that the Congress was asleep, that we have to wake up Congress. From your all's perspective, do you think Congress is asleep, or do you think they're just ignoring the issues at hand because of what we just discussed?
Yeah, I think they're definitely ignoring the people, right? They're very much awake with what their purpose is and who they're trying to serve, and
Right.
who they're trying to serve are the millionaires and billionaires and corporations that want to continue to use the labor of people in this country, the resources of the people in this country, to only benefit themselves. And so they're absolutely ignoring what's going on, and to say that they're asleep, that they're not intentional with what they're doing,
Frozen,
and instead just calling them out, then that would be the thing that I think a lot of people would rather hear, versus acting like they're not paying attention. They're very much paying attention.
They are paying attention. And here in our, we had a mayoral race in Houston. I'm in Houston, and actually from the 8th, John Wick from the 15th Texas Senatorial District. The Senatorial District is actually bigger than the Congressional District, and turnout overall was 17%. The turnout in Sheila Jackson Lee's district was a little lower than the average. The turnout in Senator Whitmire's district was maybe slightly higher, but you have two politicians who have taken up office literally combined for 90 years. Nobody cared enough about them to vote, either the senator or the congresswoman. We're facing this authoritarian democratic crisis. You'd think that both the congresswoman and the senator would be like, now the Mayor Whitmire would be like, boy, that's terrible. How can we fight back to protect ourselves, mobilize ourselves with that kind of cruddy turnout? You'd think there'd be a summit, a town hall, an urgency, but it's business as usual. It's business as usual.
And now that you bring it back locally, go ahead, Alex. Don't want to interrupt.
Well, no, I wanted to say one thing really quick before we transition to locally when it comes to the State of the Union, because a lot of people came out of the State of the Union praising Biden for what he said, how it went, and were very enthused. And there is an aspect that I can definitely understand why people were enthused based on the State of the Union. When your focus is about the party and political fights that are happening, as a Democrat, hearing the speech that he gave and seeing the support from the Democratic congressional folks in the room and the way he challenged Republicans at certain points, all of that was very was something to be enthusiastic about when you're thinking about the party and you're thinking about winning the election from the party perspective, right? Um, which at the end of the day, someone's got to win, right? So from that perspective, I can understand the enthusiasm people had about it. I think what we're trying to say is that when you prioritize party speech and when you prioritize political speech and maneuvering, but you don't prioritize talking the truth about issues, when it may also be your party who's contributing to those issues, then this is what contributes to people not trusting anyone who's running for office. This is what contributes to community members who are living every day trying to make it from one day to the next, not having enough in wages, not having enough in healthcare, not having enough in a whole sort of ways, feel like you're gaslighting them. Because from a political perspective, you're trying to beat the Republicans, Biden's trying to beat Trump. So did he give a speech that they think will help him accomplish that? From that lens, sure, that there was some positivity from that perspective, but that does not translate to the multitude of Americans that are struggling, whose votes will be needed if that's the outcome they want, that will motivate them, because you're still not talking about the issues in a real way that they believe it's going to be solved. Is there a choice between Trump and Biden, and what we see is the outcomes of being, one more negative than the other? Sure, but it's the lesser of two evils perspective that people are frustrated with. It's the fact that they still don't feel like it's going to be solved, and what is wrong with our country and what the systemic issues are is not going to be solved. And this is how we see enthusiasm gaps. This is why we see low voter turnout come the primary. This is why in Texas, the highest turnout in registered voters is 66%, and the highest number of voting age people eligible to vote is 52%, is because we're still not getting connected to what people are really concerned about. So I just wanted to kind of give that perspective around why a lot of people celebrated the State of the Union, but why we're still here talking about what the impact is when it comes to trying to address the issues and speak the truth about issues.
Yeah, I want to thank you for sharing that perspective. It's also a good segue into my next thought. You said something about political speech and maneuvering. This past week, I was just in Austin at the Unified Jam, and there was a candidate panel rather. There were those that were current elected officials. Some of them are in runoffs right now. There was one individual who spoke about being from an organizing background, but also being having to ditch pretty much the organizing hat to do the political speech and maneuvering that you're talking about in order to get the momentum that she needed. And Neil, I want to direct that to you. What does that say to you about an elected official or candidate that claims to be from an organizing background, that can pivot so easily and forget their organizing hat, the organizing space, just so they can conform to the political speech and maneuvering that Alex is talking about?
Right. So that's an eternal question, right? And so it's a valid question. But what it does is it makes for lines that are so hard and barriers that are so impenetrable that we're not talking to each other anymore. So the elected So, you know, so often when I'm involved in organizing, I'm saying that we can't be reliant on elected officials. We have to in the end be about our own efforts. We have to protect and defend ourselves. And it's clear that business as usual is leading to authoritarian outcomes.
Mhm.
I mean, it's right in front of us. And people will always say, "But we got to vote. We got to vote." And I'm like, yeah, I get, we got to vote. So I just have to every time I talk about grassroots activism or something not immediately directly related to an elected, I say, I know we got to vote. I know we got to vote. I know we got to vote. And then you have people who come from organizing backgrounds or who talk about grassroots support, who might have gotten their start, like a grotesque example is Kristen Sinema, who went from Green Party to, you know, that's an exaggerated example. Well, maybe it's not, but it's a public example, right? But there's a grotesque example. And the electeds then, so we have the great mass rank of voters. You got to vote. You got to vote. I know we got to vote. And then you have electeds who reinforce that notion of a wall between serving or running for public office and grassroots activism that diminishes the roles of grassroots activism. Hey, I got to do this now, and you were a great stepping stone, and I love your passion. Whenever you hear the term your passion, you know you're being like, oh, you're trivial bullshit. I've graduated from that, right? I hate that damn thing.
Yeah.
Oh, Neil, I love your passion, and I'm like, I'm 56 years old. Okay, I'm doing serious stuff. My clock is ticking. I'm not here for your thinking I'm an enthusiastic person.
Yeah.
So what we can't allow is electeds or candidates to put up that wall saying, and they'll use terms like, oh, I'm practical, I'm pragmatic. And I'm like, don't you think that organizers using the valuable hours of their lives to do things that are uphill fights aren't pragmatic? Don't you think that we don't calculate, is this time effective? And so, and then so we have to say to the electeds, hey, you don't have to draw that wall so firmly. You surely don't have to draw it so quickly when you haven't even been elected anything. And then we have to say to our friends and file voters, just folks trying to get through the day, look, we're going to vote, but you also got to understand that the way we're doing stuff working, and you are 10 months away from living in a Viktor Orban society when, you don't want that. You don't want that without ignoring that we lived infinitely in slavery and Jim Crow, and it took so long to get, we're barely out of that. And here we go back to this. And we need to advocate in that kind of fluid, flexible, intellectually rigorous way, saying you just can't draw these lines and bifurcate yourself out there and leave everyone else over on the other side.
Absolutely. Those are wonderful points, Neil. Alex, when it comes to organizing, you've been organizing in the trenches in Tarrant County for quite some time now, out on your own, with collectives, with collaboratory, other organizations. What is your take on elected officials utilizing an organizing atmosphere to push the idea that they're for the people and that they're the best hope, like they're the last great hope for the people, by using that organizing speak, that organizing genre? What is your take on that?
Well, I definitely think we see not only candidates and elected officials, but also large nonprofits try to co-opt organizing language to show that they're about the work, right? They're about what they're trying to do. But the fundamental flaw in what we're seeing is who are they really talking to? When you look at the State of the Union, when you look at local candidates and how they're talking to in their speeches and who they're talking to, who are they really talking to? And I think for locally in Tarrant County, as an example, it goes back to something we talked about in a previous live stream of what they define as community. Their definition of community is not where people are residing, where people are living. and where people are in the masses. Their community is that executive managerial class of people who are in industry or in, you know, affluent spaces. And so the reason they're being so careful is because they are signaling to all of us that these are the real people in power. These are the people who have the money. These are the people who have the influence. These are the people who they think are the solution to the problems, uh, depending on what those solutions are, right? And so, why the community gets frustrated, the real community, the real spaces where we live and breathe and we are connected with each other, why so many of the masses are frustrated is because that political speech is really trying to influence that higher level of community in those affluent spaces. And what grassroots organizers are constantly trying to push against is that we're trying to push for the truth of what's happening within the communities where people are dying, where people are struggling, where people are surviving instead of thriving. We should be able to have a society where we're all thriving. And so then when you look at those things and you start talking about the issues, this is where we start to get this headbutting. And like Neil said, you start getting the patronizing talk of like, you know, oh, you're just so passionate, or thank you for your great work, thank you for what's going on, and you know, you're so essential, and things like that. But really, they're trying to manage the potential pushback, because they're trying to court this, you know, upper tier of society, because we have determined in our political practices, in our organizing practices, that these are the people who we value the most. And once again, grassroots organizers are saying, no, 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 the people we value the most are the masses, because we are the ones who have the numbers, we are the ones who have the power, and we're the ones who are doing the fucking work that is giving them their money, right? So this is what we're trying to shift in terms of how we talk about issues and how we're trying to address solutions, because it's the people that are the most important, not the ego or the reputation of somebody in the executive or managerial class of things.
Absolutely. So let me backtrack and practice what I preach. So we were talking about, elected officials hiding behind choice words, specific language, doing political maneuvering. Um, the elected officials from the Unified Jam, Molly Cook, which is in Senate District 15, who's currently in a runoff, was the I am an organizer, and I had to change my tone once I got into this this role. So Neil, being that I believe is your district,
Mhm.
now that you know who that is, how does that sit with you, knowing that she's so easily, I guess you could say, flippable in how she talks and how she speaks, and how genuine can she be when she's talking to her constituents, when she can be swayed just because she's in a different space?
So, all right, so Molly's in the runoff against State Rep Jarvis Johnson, and Molly is an emergency and an organizer. She has had successful organizing. She was very involved with City Proposition B, which odds successfully has altered how the city of Houston seeks from a regional transportation fund. It was a victory of organizing, no doubt about it. And just so everyone knows, paid work for Molly in the 2022 campaign, where she ran against Senator Whitmire, got 42% of the vote against Senator John Whitmire, who subsequently ran and won for mayor. And so now the seat is. So Molly, right. Molly, what I had noticed about her campaign as it went along this time was that a lot of the substance seemed to be leaking out of it. She is very focused on transportation policy, and does impact people's lives, and is about income inequality and race, and it is about power structures, but it also presumes to do those kinds of things the thing that I ask myself when you just are focused on a policy aspect, who exactly is going to be your partner? Who's going to be your partner? Your partner is an authoritarian state government. The focus on policy, focus on kind of a bloodless process got my attention throughout her campaign. To me, it was kind of an elite conception. And what has stayed away from are some of those more basic questions that transportation policy really addresses: income inequality, race, who has power, who doesn't, gentrification. And so I was very mindful of that. I did not vote for Molly. Molly is a good person. Molly, I believe, is sincere, but I think Molly has been too quick to drop say, I now have to do this. She's drawing the lines that we were talking about in the last series of exchanges. She has so quickly drawn this line, and it didn't. She got 20 in the first time she ran. She got 42% in a two-person race against a strong candidate, although not strong as he seemed. And then in the second, I don't think the performance was quite what she thought it would be. This time around, she did get into the runoff, and she has an uphill fight. Representative Johnson, I think, is a quote-unquote establishment candidate. I'm wary about words like that sometimes because they generalize. But so Molly, Molly, I feel, is an example of someone who, for whatever reasons, felt she had to drop a grassroots community identification or de-emphasize it greatly to win, and it's not clear that the results established that for her, frankly, at this point. Not clear that it paid off.
Thank you for that, Neil. Alex, what is your take on organizers transcending into elected officials or vice versa? And is that sustainable if you're not authentic?
So I think what we've seen so far is that this conversion happens majority of the time. Is that someone who's been doing good work in the community feels the burden to run for office, which is great to see, right? You want to see community leaders stepping up to represent the community. But as soon as they leave the real community space and they enter this political community, they feel the need to listen entirely to what their perspective is and their direction and their strategies and things like that. While unfortunately ignoring the reason they got to that position was because they were autonomous and they were leading in their work by building the relationship and the base within the community to get to a point to wanting to run. And so this all comes down, unfortunately, to a few things. It's always comes down to power and money and how we navigate power and money and how we interpret power and money. Now, power is something that we've got to do a little bit more work on interpreting accurately, because we think the people who have the money are the only ones in power, but it's actually the masses, right? It's the people. If we come together as a people, we're the ones who have the real power. Money is much more clear. You either have it or you don't, right? And this is why we are fighting for Texans to understand the role of grassroots organizers and the sustainability of grassroots organizers, because this is the defense mechanism. This is the antidote against all of the political strategies, the political maneuvering, the money spent on, you'll have campaigns where they'll spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars on ads because they think that is political capital, right? And in many ways they get reaffirmed because they will win. But when you look at the numbers, a lot of times they win by maybe just a couple hundred votes or maybe a couple thousand votes. And what that tells us is that we actually have the antidote, and the antidote is community. The antidote is grassroots organizing. And if we sustain grassroots organizers and we have that established workforce in place and not being burnt out every 2 to 4 years and us having to build new grassroots organizers, but we actually get to accumulate the collective of grassroots organizers, then we actually can resist converting to this political speech. We can actually resist listening to these people who then want to milk the campaigns for their paychecks so that they have some kind of relevancy and they still get to have their positions of what they perceive as power. We can actually shift that dramatically by resourcing grassroots organizers, because you do a couple of things. One, like I've established, you have that defense line to fight against those conversion perspectives of like, now I got to start talking about this. Now I got to start talking to rich people like this way. Now I need to start talking about issues in this way because it's more comfortable for them. So you get rid of that. The second thing you do is that you have a pipeline of leaders that are being developed with a community lens and a community perspective and with the people as the priority, so that you actually start to build real power in also the elected official positions, because we start to accumulate people within those spaces as well. And so it's no it's no wonder that grassroots organizers, 60% are unpaid, 15% are underpaid, and the 25% that have full-time pay don't have benefits or are still lacking on something. And for a lot of those folks, it's no wonder that this is so underinvested, because if it was, it would completely change how those that have the influence right now would be navigating. So I know that was a little bit of a long rant. So thanks for following me with it.
Let me just take a quick second to talk just bluntly about the money. Danita has a Substack. Subscribe to it and give it money. The Houston Democracy Project takes your donation. It goes to Enact Blue, HoustonDemocracyProject.com. And I understand why people want to run for money. The Texas Grassroots Alliance, the umbrella organization, give it some money. If you donate to candidates, when I hear some of the monies when they go to candidates, I just want to cry because I'm emotional and times are tough. But then also because the resources for campaigns that don't leave any permanent infrastructure of turnout, community, or policy, they just fold up that shop and then a new campaign starts the whole wheel. It's the same consultants over and over. You get the mailers, the big ass mailers. At home, you have 90 of them. You have 100 at home. We for our viewers, and as you share word of this broadcast, send us some money so we can continue to do this work. We are people whom, in an authoritarian situation, will be on the right side of the police line. We are the people who will hold the candidates that we vote for accountable. And we are asking for resources directly because we've earned them, and we're doing the work, and we're sticking with that work, and we're leaving permanent structures with us. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for throwing it in there, Neil. I wanted to touch bases on the millions of that they spend on ads, but not grassroots organizing. I recently had a conversation with someone, and they told me, we just want to thank you so much for your passion. And Neil, you brought passion up, and I'm just like, this is not a passion project for me. This is not something I'm going to wake up in the morning and say, you know what? Let me find another passion. I want to pick lily pads from the pond. These are not passions. This is something that we're truly advocating for, organizing against. Like the democracy that we're facing currently, our democracy is at threat. Like
Right.
we're suppressing, everybody from voting any which way at this point. We're blocking people from buying land in this state. There's no body autonomy for women or transgender children. And so we have candidates who avoid those topics because they're taboo, or they may hurt their millions of dollars that they're getting in ads or donations. And so now you're wanting, our request is that we donate it to grassroots organizers. when people come at you and say, what's the purpose of that? How would you two respond?
Okay, I would just say, right, passion. Right, we talked about it in our pre-show. Whenever I hear the word passion, I'm like, buzz off, because that's just a dismissive word. Thank you for your, Don Quixote like investment in shit that ain't never going to happen. Like I'm not a rational actor who isn't cognizant of these are the hours for my, okay, I'd rather be watching, NCIS Hawaii with my wife, frankly, than I know I shouldn't watch propaganda, but the, these are choices. And I think it's important for people watching and people thinking that these are organizers are individuals, are making choices, are taking career paths that maybe aren't as easy or as lucrative as other career paths, are putting themselves out there emotionally. And it's not a sob story. I live great. I'm a privileged, fortunate person. But it is important to take a cold, clear look at the political ecosystem. Why do I have 9 mailers for this candidate? What did that consultant who advised that make? Why doesn't turnout ever go up? Why does business as usual leave us to an authoritarian outcome when we're just not even a full lifetime away for many people from Jim Crow, or for the formal legal structures of Jim Crow beyond its ongoing vestiges? Ask yourself just those basic Socratic questions and help out, and expand a little bit. I'm not saying you're intellectually constricted, but just think it all out, and let's look at different ways. And you can, unlike our electeds who starting out with the premise of Molly, who says, now I got to do this to be that. We can have feet in both worlds. We can advocate normal, practical voting. Understand that there are differences between the two parties. There are moral differences. We can acknowledge that without undermining ourselves, and we can also say there's a lot of stuff that's never going to get addressed. And doesn't the argument? The last thing I'll say: we're always told you got to be patient, you got to be pragmatic, you got to believe in incremental change. But I'll just point out that if you told me 30 years ago that Roe v. Wade would be gone, the Voting Rights Act would be substantively gone, and we had screwed up the weather, and that we'd be here just advocating for free elections, I would have been bummed out. And here we are. So I get incremental change, all for it, but it ain't working. It's not working.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Without systemic change, it doesn't last, right? We need real systemic change.
Yeah. And Alex, Neil mentioned that these candidates in their campaigns bring in millions and millions of dollars, but don't leave any lasting change or impact or infrastructure. And I know with Texas Grassroots Alliance and Tearing for Change that you're trying to build out that type of infrastructure. What would you say to elected officials and candidates that have these war chests? What is their duty toward the community and residents and making that infrastructure happen?
Yeah. So I think let's break down what we mean by infrastructure. It's very similar to what we mean by community. For folks who run for office, their community is not about where people reside. It's about building relationships with the executive managerial class and the affluent spaces and influencers within the community. Your money, the money you give to a campaign, is to help them build relationships in those top tier spaces in our community. Okay. Whereas with grassroots organizing, we're building infrastructure with the masses. We're building relationships with people and where they live and where they reside so that we can be connected. And it's a much larger infrastructure that's needed because it's so many more people and there's many more relationships that need to be developed. But this is the difference between infrastructure. And the other thing I want to make a distinction for is the other thing that people give, what they're paying for when they give money to a candidate is the second thing they're paying for is a PR campaign. They're paying for advertising. Okay. They're paying for a strategy that is going to try to convince people to vote for them by advertising to them, by advertising to the masses. And we see over and over and over that we are not going to solve turnout. We're not going to solve changing what is happening in our country by simply advertising to people. It's not going to work. There's too many other entertainment outlets. There's too many other types of advertisement that it just gets lumped up with all the same. It's not making a real impact on people. For some, maybe, but for the majority, it's not. What is going to make an impact is this relationship infrastructure that grassroots organizers will be doing with the resources that they are provided. They are going to show up to the community meetings. They are going to reach out to community members. They're going to take the time to have these conversations. They're going to take the time to build actions so that we are doing work together to try to see change in our community. And so the investment people are making in grassroots organizers is the actual sustainable infrastructure that we need, not just for one election cycle, but for every aspect of change that we're trying to fight for. And so give money to candidates so that they can build relationships with top tier elite people in your community and to advertise to the masses. We see that is fundamentally flawed and not working for the type of change, the systemic change we need in our state, in our communities, or start giving money to grassroots organizers so they can build the actual relationship infrastructure within our communities that is going to build a movement and build a mass connection amongst various communities to work together to see these changes through in a very systemic way. So that's the pitch to everyone, in my opinion.
All right.
How do you think that went?
I think that went great. I think that went great. Again, I'm Danita with Texas Resistance Rising. You can follow me on Substack. And then we have Alexander Montalvo of Terror for Change, who's also a member of the Texas Grassroots Alliance. And you can donate in the link in the chat. Also, we have Neil Aquino again with the Houston Democracy Project, and you can donate to him on HoustonDemocracyProject.com for more information. We have had a very good discussion on just starting from the State of the Union and how that reflects on what people are thinking when our elected officials and our candidates speak so broadly, but don't necessarily speak to the issues that we are facing. Alex, I'm going to put into the chat the link to the President's State of the Union address if someone wants to go and peruse it so they can see if they didn't get a chance to watch the State of the Union, they can read the words themselves and see if they see themselves in the address. I, for one, as someone who watched it and also read it, it was very vague. There were bits and pieces, that didn't resonate with me. There were some that addressed issues that I have currently living with, but still didn't resonate with me. And then we have the grassroots organizers. What does that look like in securing that infrastructure? So, Neil, I'll start with you. What is like your sounding statement to get the message out that it is important to have grassroots organizations and grassroots organizers peeling back the layers that our elected officials and candidates have provided?
Great. Well, I'll just say, so I think since we're asking for support and donations, and if you go to my website, HoustonDemocracy.com, you'll see on there the specific steps that I'm taking. This network of programs that I'm very hopeful will be widely watched as we approach the election. The John Cornyn Houston office protest I'm part of. I was the speaker at the Humboldt Democratic Club, just to show that the mainstream system and grassroots organizing can easily coexist. I was in Humboldt, Texas. I was the featured speaker 2 nights ago. A daily blog is on the website. I'm on the Egberto Willies KPFT 6 a.m. broadcast every Thursday. Egberto Willies is a Texas Grassroots Alliance member who you'll be seeing on these shows. And I have a petition a change.org linked petition on my website asking people to commit to physically showing up in 2020, 2024, and 25, no matter what the political situation is. Commit to physically showing up. So what I'm doing is doing the work, asking for support doing the work, specifically stating what the work is, what I'm doing, and what I hope to achieve. And these efforts of camaraderie and growing the networks, which is the point of these shows across the state, is essential.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil. Alex, what would you like to say to all the grassroots organizations and grassroots organizers? What is their role into making sure that uh, this infrastructure that we're trying to build comes to fruition?
So Terror for Change is introducing a model in the county that we want to see replicated in various ways throughout the state of Texas. And we are collaborating with folks all throughout the state to try to make this happen by the end of this decade. What is key for grassroots organizers is that we are working within an industry and within a system that wants us to be siloed. They want us to just focus on what we are focusing on, and that will ultimately lead us to competing with each other for resources, for spotlight, and for support. And what we are trying to introduce, which is also with the help of the Texas Grassroots Alliance, and the whole purpose of the Texas Grassroots Alliance is we want to build relationships with every single organizer that is doing work that is geared towards a safe, just, equitable, and inclusive society and community in Tarrant County. If that is what you're about, it doesn't matter what issue it is. Right. It doesn't matter what part of the county you're in. We want to build the relationship with each other so that we are connected to each other's communities, so that we can work on the multitude of issues that we're connected with, because these are all, as the Poor People's Campaign says, these are all interlocking injustices. We want to make sure that we are connected and we are collectively working on trying to solve the gap in resources that we have. So for Terror for Change, if we get a grant of X amount of money, we are trying to get that money not only to the team on Terror for Change, but also to our collaborators in our projects. We're trying to make sure that we are distributing the resources to help fund grassroots organizing at various levels, and also our local businesses that are aligned with our work, and also our local creatives and artists that are aligned with our work, because this network and this collective is what's needed for us to overcome what is happening in our county and ultimately what's happening in our state. So my encouragement to grassroots organizers is build relationships with each other. Let's build trust with each other. Let's share not only in labor, but let's share in resources too, because with us being united and together, we will be able to overcome what's happening in our state. And as much as they attempt us to be siloed and tempt us to compete, let us push back on whoever is trying to encourage that within our communities.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex and Neil. And what I want to leave our guests with is, at a time when our attention is misdirected by media, candidate promises, elected officials' promises, we must find new ways to break through that distortive narrative in the country and also within our own state. And we know that the issue of the day are bigger than the dichotomy of Republicans versus Democrats, conservatives versus liberal. Our nation depends on our capacity to see deeper and more expansively. And I just want to say that politicians don't speak on our behalf. Let's be honest and true to that. They don't speak on our behalf. They speak on the behalf of their donors. And so our task is to build power necessary to hold our political system to a genuine account, to be able to not just look at our elected officials as our friends, because how many potlucks has your elected official been to? How many church services has your elected official been to just as a person and not as an elected official? We want to be able to hold them accountable because once and for all, they need to understand that we put them in office and we can remove them from office just as quickly. So I want to thank Alex Montalvo with 10 for Change. Again, you can donate to Texas Grassroots Alliance with the link in the chat. Neil Aquino of the Houston Democracy Project, and you can find him and follow his blog on HoustonDemocracyProject.com. And myself, Danita with Texas Resistance Rising. Please make sure you subscribe in the Substack. And again, thank you all for your time. I know it's 50 minutes, but I think it was 50 minutes worth well spent. Make sure you share out this recording and also let your people know in your networks that we are organizing for a change to move Texas further forward with the help of organizers. So again, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Great conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.